Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, taking a look inside some of the biggest matchups in the Big Ten for Week 8. And we've got a bounce-back spot for the Michigan Wolverines. They're playing at home. They've got Washington coming into town. We got our West Coast team playing in the early slate on Saturday. But forget your time zones. I need to go inside what happened last week. So let's start with the Michigan side of this. Let's go Tom, Bud, Danny. What went wrong for the Michigan Wolverines in a double-digit loss to USC?
I would say primarily the fact that they got beat up on the lines of scrimmage by the old soft USC Trojans, or at least, the narrative that has hung around USC for years. The Trojans really beat them up there. But I think the other spot you have to look at is Bryce Underwood just did not play well. And we were talking on the show last week about how much better Bryce Underwood is starting to look, how much more comfortable he is starting to get in that Michigan offense, and how he was starting to find a rhythm and a flow. And that all kind of disappeared against USC last week. And I think the reason for it was, if we go back to Michigan's first loss of the year on the road against Oklahoma, what did Brent Venables do? He did the thing he always does. He blitzed the hell out of the quarterback, and especially a young one in his first road start. And it was very effective. What did USC do last week? They blitzed the hell out of Bryce Underwood, and he did not look comfortable dealing with it. And it was the most that Michigan had dealt with the blitz since that Oklahoma game, and it was Bryce Underwood's worst performance since that game. So I think that's the one thing that they'll probably need to address in practice this week, getting ready for this one, because we also saw Washington last week. They blitzed on over 50% of Rutgers' dropbacks on offense. I think you're going to see a very similar plan from a Washington defense that's been a little banged up on that side of the ball and has had to find ways to generate pressure through the blitz. Will they bring that same kind of pressure on the road with them to Michigan? I suspect they will, until Bryce Underwood proves he's capable of beating it.
Yeah, Tom, when I look at this, I'm a little bit higher on Underwood in that game, but I agree it wasn't his best game. I look at what they did on the interior offensive line. Michigan just is getting whipped this year at times on the offensive line. Like they are not, which is surprising, right? With Sharon Moore being the former offensive line guy, I'm surprised how much they've fallen off there. Their starting guard had a PFF grade of 45. Their starting center, a PFF grade of 53. Like USC just out-physicaled them, and that's got to be pretty concerning if you're Michigan, because I don't know if that gets fixed in a given week. But Washington, not quite as physical on the defensive line of scrimmage as USC was. So maybe there is some hope there.
Yeah, I mean, it feels weird to say this, but I totally agree with you guys. They got out-physicaled by USC. Like, this is a team that typically imposes its will on most teams, including Ohio State. Like, that's why they've had this run of 4 years straight, and now all of a sudden they're not. You gave up 200 yards rushing to USC. Like, that's something you cannot allow to happen against Washington. So I think clearly they need to step up. It's the reason Sharon Moore is talking about he's wearing the blue collar. We're going back to our mentality where we got to dominate up front. All you got to do is put on a jacket with your name on it. Look like the gas station worker going back to work. But it does. I mean, it is sort of alarming to see them not as physically dominant as they've been in years past.
Thank you for bringing that up, Danny, because I had a similar reaction to our 1962 go grab a soda pop from the gas station and crank it off the edge while you get your car filled up. America, right? You know what that tells me, honestly? I think Sharon Moore probably feels some pressure. I mean, the 2 games that he was gone, 2 good wins for the Michigan Wolverines. So this is a big game for Moore. But what about the other side, Danny? Does Washington, I want to say, do they have the horses, but I should say, do they have the dogs for the Huskies? But does Washington have the players to do it? Do they have the team to go into the big house, early kickoff, and be able to land a punch, a haymaker that would, I think, be a huge piece of sort of Washington continuing to have an impact here on the Big Ten in the early years of its membership, but then also, of course, create a lot of talking points for the Wolverines moving forward? Do you see Washington being able to get the early win?
Damon Williams is a problem for a lot of teams. And granted, he was held in check by Ohio State, but we're talking about Ohio State maybe being the best defense in the entire country. And I don't care who the opponent is. You have over 500 yards of total offense just by yourself, with over 400 passing and 100 yards rushing. And you've got the weapons to work with, like Jonah Coleman and Boston on the outside. Absolutely. Because when you have a quarterback who's so dynamic it can put your defense in a bind. You can't just go out physical him because you might win some matchups up front, but he can devastate you up front if you have him stop. So yes, to answer your question, I do think they have some of the horsepower in order to make this a really uncomfortable spot for the Michigan Wolverines.
Bud, are you buying?
Yeah, I'm buying. I don't see a big difference between these teams. I think that Michigan, if fully healthy, has a few more difference makers, probably just especially on the defensive side of the ball. But like if you look at Washington's firepower, I think Bryce is a much better prospect long term than Damon Williams is. But right now, I don't think that one is way better than the other. I think Washington is better at receiver. I think if Justice Haynes is banged up, then certainly Washington is better at running back. So yeah, I'm absolutely buying. And I also give the coaching.
I'm not nearly as confident as the rest of you guys, apparently, because watching Washington this year, like, yeah, they've got the names, DeMond Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, like an excellent trio. And the offense looked fantastic in their non-conference games. But you mentioned Ohio State completely shut them down. And I know Michigan's not Ohio State. No defense truly is. But they didn't do anything. Like, they were able to move the ball a bit. But then as soon as Ohio State put the clamps on them, boom, done. Nothing. And then you look at the last time they went on the road against Maryland. They didn't do anything against Maryland for the first 3 quarters of that game before they finally got things going late to come back and win that one. So we saw even last week, they got off to a slow start in the first half against Rutgers. And yeah, they put up great numbers and they finished with a whole lot of points. But like, Rutgers stinks. Like, if your offense doesn't score at least 21 points against this Rutgers defense, you should probably fire your offensive coordinator. They've been giving up points to every single team that they've played. So I don't put a whole lot of faith in that. So you're going on the road against Michigan. I need to see them do it. I need to see them get off to a much better start in the first half than they have been, and I need to see them prove that they can play well in both areas of the ball on offense at the same time. I think Michigan's defense is still good. I don't really hold anything against it for giving up points to an excellent USC offense. So that's going to be the one thing I really need to see from this unit going on the road.
Washington's secondary has dealt with injuries sort of throughout the season, so the whole stat profile is not necessarily overwhelming or representative of what they could be. Still, a name that you brought up on the Instant Reaction show, Tom, maybe a big Jake Marsh game. The law offices of Marsh and McCulley as Michigan continues to try to put together a passing attack for Bryce Underwood. All things to keep an eye on. Again, that is a noon Eastern time kickoff as Washington heads into the Big House to take on Michigan. Well, coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the Ohio State Buckeyes, the number 1 team in the land. They will be on CBS in the big time game for Week 8. We'll get into the matchup and more next.